Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, with your leave, I rise to lend my support to the honourable mover of the Appropriation 2021 Bill 2020. Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Dr. the Honourable Timothy Harris, Parliamentary Representative for Constituency Number 7, would have addressed this Parliament on the estimated revenue and expenditure that this government expects to realize in 2021. He would have given an overview of the various programs and work plans of the Team Unity administration for the upcoming year, some 6 days ago at the St. Kitts Marriott Resort. As you know, we are convened there under the special circumstances occasioned by COVID-19 to allow for members and invited guests, albeit a limited number given the constraints of physical distancing and made up primarily of diplomats and senior public servants, to hear him. The Prime Minister's address followed the tabling of financial documents required by law to do so, and the second reading of the bill, and began the budget debate that has ensued since then, with the ministers of his cabinet reporting to the nation on their individual portfolios. Today, Mr. Speaker, it is the turn of the Office of the Attorney General and the Minister responsible for Justice and Legal Affairs, yours truly, to report to this Honourable House. And I do so in relation to the various subject matters that fall under those portfolios, as well as the two committees assigned to me by the Honourable Prime Minister. One as Chairman or Co-Chair of the National Disaster Mitigation Council, which oversees the National Task Force in response to COVID-19 pandemic, and as the Chairman of the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee. And I will also make mention of one or two other matters, if time permits, that as Attorney General I have been tasked. As Minister of Justice and Legal Affairs, Subject 04 in the budget estimates, we are responsible for support for judicial institutions and legal services that will function in an enabling legal framework, ensuring a transparent, fair, and equitable system of justice, which gives to our citizens a measure of stability and security while promoting democracy and the rule of law. We superintend the High Court and Magistrates' Courts, the Law Commission, the Land Registry, the Intellectual Property Office, and the Legal Aid and Advice Center. In accordance with Section 64 of the Constitution, the Attorney General is the principal legal advisor of the government of St. Christopher and Nevis. Such functions as outlined in the Attorney General's Act include ensuring that the administration of public affairs is in accordance with the Constitution and the law, supervising all matters connected with the administration of justice, advising on the legislative agenda, and generally advising the government on all matters of law referred to the Attorney General's chambers, advising the government on all matters of a legislative nature, and superintending all government measures, advising the permanent secretaries, departmental heads, and directors of the ministries on all matters of law affecting such ministries, departments, and the government as a whole, conducting and regulating all litigation for and against the Crown and any government, ministry, and department, and performing such other functions as may be assigned by the Governor General, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister. As such, Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Attorney General provides significant support to the government in the form of advice and legal representation in all matters where the Crown is concerned. Importantly, its pivotal responsibility for drafting all legislations that goes to Parliament from the executive branch creates a major impact for the law and order mandate of the government. In its present configuration, the Office of the Attorney General also provides administrative support for the independent functioning of both the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Electoral Office. These two functions, respectively, are critical to the impartial dispensation of justice and the maintenance of the Federation's robust democratic tradition. Mr. Speaker, I would want to highlight or turn to budget highlights as were laid out by the Honorable Minister of Finance last week. Mr. Speaker, the appropriation bill before the House and the schedule incorporated in it shows total estimates of expenditure for the year 2021 to be $867,919,842. This is made up of the total revenue, total recurrent expenditure, plus capital expenditure and net lending, and charges on the consolidated fund equaling the sum of $770,136,053. And added to that is the total provided by law to be $97,783,789. And I should just quickly, Mr. Speaker, allude to what is some of those items, expenses that are provided by law. And this would be for the Governor General, $157,219, which includes such things as his salary, the Governor General's salary, duty allowance, allowance in lieu of exemption from custom duty, etc. Also, it speaks to the head of audit and the director of audit salary, plus Social Security contributions, which are just under $100,000 or $99,470. It also refers to a head of the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs and speaks to proportionate expenses of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court as have been identified from information that was obtained from the Registrar's office. And this head fundamentally is $1,397,100. Also, the ministry or the office of the Attorney General has a head here, and this looks to the salary of the Director of Public Prosecutions and his Social Security contributions, plus some set aside for the Electoral Office. As we mentioned earlier, the independent function of both the Director of Public Prosecution and the Electoral Office, and these provided for by law a sum of $987,397. Of course, there are such things as the Office of the Prime Minister, Service Commissions, all the allowances provided by law. The Ministry of Finance has some $95,107,103, and the largest item there would be retiring benefits. Benefits for retirees, their interest payments and exchange, loan repayment, etc. But the total expenses provided by law are $97,783,789. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note that added to that significant sum, or those two significant sums, that the balance of the total estimates is made up of the total capital expenditure that we estimate will be used in 2021. And this is in the sum of $192,695,423. Mr. Speaker, this is an increase of some 19 million plus, or 2.2% over the estimates of total expenditure made for this year that is now coming to an end. In other words, the budget that we are dealing with, Covet budget, has an expenditure of some 2.2% more than what was budgeted for a year ago for 2020. The estimated recurrent expenditure has an increase of some 3.4% over last year, while capital expenditure is about 0.6% more than last year, more than the current expenditure for this year. And it's important, Mr. Speaker, that the current year estimates, as we build our projects and programs, as we stimulate the economy and continue to improve the lives of our citizens, those who are doing well and those who are vulnerable. This appropriation bill currently before the House allocates a sum of $9,786,179 to the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, or some $1,538,979, or 13.6% less than that budgeted last year for this year. So the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs takes a decrease in the amounts allocated in this very critical year in which we operate, COVID. And we note that the sum of $12,646,840 to the Office of the Attorney General. Similarly, this has a decrease of some $1,272,745, or 9.1% less than the amount that had been estimated for the current year. So that the two portfolio heads which we oversee, which we superintend, we have been placed in a situation where we have to make do with a decrease in the amounts allocated given the very difficult times in terms of revenue that we are in. Mr. Speaker, the financial estimates over the past 5 years are very instructive, for they have been put into operation for the most part, and they have showed an excellent performance by the Team Unity administration, and by extension, our country, by any measure. I know that there are some who cannot, will not come to terms with this reality, and they will do anything. They will say anything. They have been saying anything to throw cold water on that, as we say, to upend the apple cart. But we say that they will fail, because the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, whether you are supporters of the Labour Party, NRP, CCM, PLP, PAM, Unity, all Unity, they know the truth. They feel it where it matters. They have known the truth over the last 5 years about double salary, holiday pay bonus. They know then, and they still know now, of the $500 poverty alleviation payment. Hurricane roof repairs to the homes. They know, they see the lines, the traffic jams, the excitement that comes with VAT-free days, like last Friday and Saturday. They feel the excitement, but they also understand COVID. Mr. Speaker, it has been a most moving experience to see 2020 unfold. For this budget cycle is in an unparalleled season of global economic uncertainty, and it is imperative for us to respond in a manner that will ensure that we continue to exhibit the excellent stewardship in public affairs that we have delivered, and what the people of St. Kitts and Nevis have come to expect of us, of this Team Unity administration over the past 5 years. As we have done in the past, we are committed to work to bolster the social and economic well-being of our people into 2021 and beyond. And Mr. Speaker, lest we forget, this budget address of the Honorable Prime Minister and debate that has ensued comes during a year, a COVID year, in which the Team Unity movement has had a resounding victory at the polls on June the 5th, defeating the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party and the NRP in a convincing manner, in an unprecedented way. Each of the partners in Unity did exceptionally well. In Central, Constitution number 2, PAM beat the Labour Party and took back the Central Bastia after 25 years. That is a significant achievement. In Constitution number 3, West Bastia, the PLP beat Labour bad. Labour had never lost that seat since universal adult suffrage was introduced in our country in 1952, 68 years ago. And in Nevis, CCM. What can we say?
Oh, yes.
The winner all 3 seats,
oh, yes.
there for the first time ever. Unity did it this year in the midst of all the tension of COVID. A resounding victory and a job well done. Mr. Speaker, this past year has been a challenging one, filled with interesting experiences and new learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 has affected every part of this world, and indeed the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is no exception. Mr. Speaker, as this government seeks to revitalize the economy and all sectors and industries in the country, we will continue to promote transparency, accountability, equity, good governance, and compliance with the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, our response to the pandemic has and will continue to be based on the rule of law and the advancement of peace, order, good government, and justice in the Federation. Mr. Speaker, I want at this point in time to speak a little bit about the response to the COVID-19 pandemic that has engulfed us. In early January, it became evident that this virus that started in Wuhan, China, was making its way around the globe. Prime Minister Harris and the Team Unity administration was alerted by our health professionals and by NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency, and the National Disaster Mitigation Council was mobilized. We did not wait until it was declared a pandemic to begin our preparations. We began a robust national education program for all levels of healthcare workers, citizens and residents, so that they could be aware of the new viral disease, COVID-19. The World Health Organization, WHO, declared COVID-19 a pandemic in March 11th, on March 11th, 2020. But, Mr. Speaker, we were not caught flat-footed like many other countries had been. We followed the science and the advice of the WHO. Mr. Speaker, we, and when I say we, I'm speaking about those of us who sat in the National Disaster Mitigation Council that oversees and works with NEMA, an intergovernmental, interdepartmental, interministerial council across government, the whole of government, that is divided into 10 different committees. A council that is set up, and we normally hear about primarily at the time of hurricanes, when hurricanes are coming, shelters being prepared, the public works, utilities, a whole range of public service as well as private sector interdependent groups who meet to ensure that we in St. Kitts and Nevis prepare and are ready to take on any disaster. And so the National Disaster Mitigation Council, working with NEMA and with our health experts, mobilized. We mobilized. We began a robust, as I said, education program, and we had not been caught flat-footed. We developed a national strategic preparedness and response plan for COVID-19 with the aim to do 4 things, Mr. Speaker. 1, to slow and stop transmission of this disease. 2, to prevent outbreaks and delay spread of the disease. 3, provide optimized care for all patients, especially the seriously ill. And 4, minimize the impact of the epidemic on health systems, social services, and then economic activity. Our approach, Mr. Speaker, has been one of a whole of society approach. There has been coordination to support preparedness and response, including the health, transport, travel, trade, finance, security, and other sectors. We attempted to sensitize the public to their active role in the response and stress personal responsibility in this fight. We enhanced our hospital and community preparedness plans to ensure that space, staffing, and supplies are adequate for a surge in patient care needs. We continually assessed where we were and the effectiveness of what we had accomplished and used that information to plan future preparedness and response activities. And Mr. Speaker, we are continually monitoring the markets for new approved products to add in the fight, to aid in the fight, to be it laboratory, diagnostics, therapeutics, and or vaccines. And the Team Unity administration injected some $16 million into our healthcare system to bring us to such a state of readiness for this war against COVID-19. And this was done, utilized in a number of different ways. You would have heard, Mr. Speaker, that on the 17th of March this year, the Health Emergency Operating Center, HEOC 2020, was mobilized, activated, and located at the Joseph N. France Hospital conference room and the Ministry of Health conference room, where our team met on a regular basis, virtually or in person, to address the crisis. I say virtually, Mr. Speaker, because it's a word that we hear very often nowadays. And from time to time, I'll come back to it, and at some point, I will try to get into it. But what it meant is that the Chief Medical Officer, who chairs this Health Emergency Operating Center, the Medical Office of Health in Nevis, I should call their names Dr. Laws in St. Kitts, in Nevis, Dr. Judy Nisbet, other medical fraternity would meet daily, every morning. There was this constant exchange of ideas, working, and information across the Federation as our health professionals got mobilized. Key to this as well would have been the medical chief of staff of the Joseph N. France General Hospital. And very early, Mr. Speaker, we started with continuing medical education for all levels of staff with COVID-19. We took this education activity across the Federation to every school, major businesses, nursing care institutions, and prison. We were keen to ensure that everyone in St. Kitts and Nevis was aware of what was happening with COVID. Our knowledge of COVID didn't just happen so. It was strategically dealt with, and we worked very hard to ensure that the populace got to know about it. Our team had a virtual conference, a conference by Zoom, with Chi Mai Center, Taiwan. That's a 17,000-bed institution with a 100-bed ICU, where we shared ideas of best practices with the management of COVID-19 patient and health institution preparedness. We prepared an infection prevention and control guidance manual that informed healthcare persons at the institution with protocols in dealing with every aspect of the COVID-19 patients, included after death. A helpline was set up. You dial 311 to address the public concerns, and this was operational 24/7. We had volunteers. People volunteered to come and work through the night. People who had their jobs would come and put in a 6-hour shift, an 8-hour shift, and they worked very, very diligently. And we have all of us, all these people, a debt of gratitude, and all those who worked in the system. In the early days of the pandemic, this happened when not much was known about the virus, and there was widespread panic. We attempted, Mr. Speaker, to keep the public informed with regular public service announcements, press conferences, and filming interviews with the government's SKNIS. And everybody in St. Kitts and Nevis must recall those daily briefings at NEOC. Every afternoon, there was a meeting. Some 58 of them. And I could say that I attended that much at 49, but we made sure that the public was made aware of what was happening at every move. We made structural changes to the emergency room at our main hospital and other physically separating the treatment section for patients with flu-like illnesses from those with other medical emergencies. We augmented the physician staff in the emergency room by adding 7 extra doctors to the usual team of 9. We placed a hold on elective surgeries, meaning no routine operations in general surgery, orthopedics, plastics, gynecology, etc., so that every doctor can have had a laser eye focus on fighting this pandemic in the early stages. We augmented our staff with help from outside. Lest we forget 30 specialist nurses and 4 critical care specialists. Doctors were brought into the Federation from Cuba. 25 of those nurses are deployed in St. Kitts, along with 3 of the critical care specialists. The others were deployed to Nevis. They are all still here. We are not taking any chance with this COVID. The Joseph N. France Hospital was identified as the institution that would house patients with COVID-19, and the private ward with 15 single rooms is the ward being used with a plan to command more of the hospital if needed. Other institutions, Mary Charles and Paxton Hospitals, were also placed in a state of preparedness. And it could go on and on, Mr. Speaker, with the preparations that were done. Supplies and equipment, ventilators. We have gotten over 30 in our country. Infrared thermometers, PPEs, and we had this PPE, some sort of protective gear, personal protective equipment, where you're closed to protect those workers who are on the front line. Nebulizers, portable X-ray machines, defibrillators, and we even had 2 new ambulances, just to name a few. Mr. Speaker, our first important case arrived on a plane in 25th March 2020, but we were prepared. We were ready. During the year, we have continued our robust testing, isolation and quarantine program. We ensured that all who needed to be tested were tested using the gold standard PCR test, and isolated all positive patients and quarantined anyone with a potential exposure. Mr. Speaker, we did not hesitate. When we had our first case, we closed our borders in a timely manner on March 25th to curb the number of cases being imported, and successfully flattened our curve and prevented an overwhelming of our health system. We imposed a nation lockdown to contain the virus and was one of the few nations to avoid community spread to date. The National Emergency Operating Center was activated to coordinate the national response required using a multi-sectorial and multi-stakeholder approach. We successfully held, and this is critical, constitutionally due elections during this period, ensuring every citizen exercised their right to vote while abiding by COVID-19 protocols to prevent spread. And then we slowly reopened our country internally to begin generating economic activity while we continued our fight against the virus. And then we saw a wider reopening of our borders on October 31st, after significant changes were made to the airports, RLB and Vincent airports. I've said this, I've given this detailed outline, Mr. Speaker, to show that this government, this Team Unity government, has taken this COVID-19 pandemic with the utmost seriousness. And so all of this year, everyone in St. Kitts and Nevis, all Christian divisions, no matter where you are in this world, must be proud of our country, because we have successfully contained this COVID-19. It is not a small thing, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue fighting to protect our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We have seen success at containing this virus with the prescription of the non-pharmaceuticals, that is, social and physical distancing. Don't get too close to everybody. No mass gatherings, wearing masks, hand sanitizing, and proper cough etiquette. We have had no major hospitalizations. And as yet, we have had no deaths in St. Kitts and Nevis. We have been able to hold strain until a vaccine arrives. There are now 2 vaccines with over 90% efficacy. And this is not the time for us to drop our guard. We got to hold strain. Our people must know, and they get it, that it's only for a time. This too will pass. And those of us who want to go on a rampage, take it easy. Take it easy. It too will pass. We are a model for the rest of the world. And we need to be proud, each and every one of us, that this is how you do it. We have positioned ourselves by signing on to the COVAX facility, which will ensure that we will receive the vaccine when it's available globally. We all have had to make personal sacrifices in this successful fight thus far against this deadly virus. And for the first time in our lifetime, we have to be conscious that the decisions made by each and every one of us can affect each and every one of us negatively or positively. Mr. Speaker, our response to the pandemic has been a strategically inclusive one. In that regard, we have sought to engage key stakeholders in every consultation, and they have been empowered to lend their voices to the process of decision-making, policy formulation, and the enactment of timely and relevant legislation. Mr. Speaker, the Emergency Powers Proclamation and the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020 were the first laws enacted to specifically seek to control and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And in that vein, on the advice of the Honorable Prime Minister, His Excellency the Governor General declared a state of emergency from Saturday 28th March 2020 in light of the imminent threat posed by the rapid and potentially deadly spread of novel coronavirus on a global scale. Mr. Speaker, since then, we have passed into law 16 iterations of the COVID-19 regulations. There have been 16 publications of new regulations since that day on March 28th. Each of them have sought to balance the varying levels of restrictions and freedoms. The legal framework for COVID-19 includes various protocols and provisions to effectively manage the crisis, protect the vulnerable, and promote sustainable recovery. Mr. Speaker, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 number 16 regulations, SRNO number 47 of 2020, is the current law regulating the response to and management of the pandemic, and is intended to have effect up until midnight on Thursday, 31st December 2020. And in that regard, Mr. Speaker, our emergency restrictions, including curfews and lockdowns, were firmly anchored in the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, the legality of the emergency actions that were taken by the government to seek to protect the people of this country have been challenged in the courts of law and have been found to be reasonable or appropriate. These actions, Mr. Speaker, mirror those of the international community, and they were necessary, although they were inconvenient or unconventional to some. In the face of the threat of this health crisis, Mr. Speaker, there were curfews and lockdowns implemented all over the world. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, the necessity for addressing the various concerns that arose out of the pandemic would have obviously demanded considerable legislative focus this year, both for primary and subsidiary legislation. Consequently, we have seen the tabling and debate of a resolution to extend the state of emergency that would initially have been declared in March of this year. And you recall that that initial declaration of a state of emergency by His Excellency on the 28th of March would have gone for a maximum of 21 days. And then we would have had to come to this Parliament. And we came to Parliament in April, early in April, and we passed a resolution. And it's a very important period, Mr. Speaker, because some wanted to know, are you going to do it for 12 months? Why do you need 12 months? Why do you need a state of emergency? Huh? We said, okay, you don't want 12 months? Let's do it for 6 months. And we passed a resolution for 6 months. And I'll speak to it further, because there has been back and forth on this. The back and forth, Mr. Speaker. And it's something for us to understand what we have been having to do as a government of national unity. Mr. Speaker, based on the advice of the CMO and her team, the Cabinet took the bold decision to curtail operations in March for several weeks. We locked down. People had to line up to go to supermarkets. We zoned them. We forget. But these are very critical things that we had to do to be able to have people change their behaviors, to wear masks. During this period, some persons within the Ministry of the Attorney General, Justice and Legal Affairs operated from home. The resumption of face-to-face work in April saw some staff working on a shift system to avoid overcrowding of offices in compliance with COVID-19 regulations. In terms of the way forward, Mr. Speaker, you may well recall that on the 17th of November, just a few weeks ago, this Parliament passed into law the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Act. Mr. Speaker, in that sitting of Parliament, it became incumbent upon us to bring before the Honourable House critical legislation on the prevention and control of the COVID-19 coronavirus. The law has been passed, and we await the order of the Minister to activate it once the state of emergency and the regulations that stand expire on Thursday next week. But the COVID-19 Act would then take effect. We also note, Mr. Speaker, that if by any chance there's any serious outbreak in our country, we have the option to go back to the state of emergency. We have that option. It has stood us well all year to have had that state of emergency in place. It has stood us well to be able to have these regulations, emergency power regulations, that have come out to support their response to the COVID-19. And we cannot take it for granted. We cannot drop our guard. This thing is not over. And we have to be vigilant, each and every one of us. We are all our brother's keeper in this matter. Mr. Speaker, it is anticipated that the Act, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 Act, will provide for an appropriate, sound and valid framework as we continue to seek to protect the people in this federation from this disruptive and potentially deadly virus. Mr. Speaker, most of us are only too painfully aware of what the world statistics look like. In our own way, here we have not been immune to the incursion of this tsunami-like threat, which has had a phenomenal effect on our economies, on our businesses, on travel, and our way of life. People want to go strip every night. They want carnival. But we got to be careful. Just this weekend, in England, they're locking down because we have now found a new strain of this deadly virus. and it's spreading faster than the one before. We just opened up to British Airways on Saturday. One plane come, and when that one plane come, we hear in England, Belgium's locked them out, Netherlands locked them out, France locked out English, Germany locked them out, Canada not taking any planes. What do? We have to be careful, very, very careful in protecting our people. It is not over. We cannot take it for granted. We have to be careful. And we'll talk about how we will modify our regulations as we go forward. I cannot tire, Mr. Speaker, in commending the members of the Covet task force, which I've had the honor to oversee, along with Senator Phipps, and the exemplary manner in which they have conducted their onerous duties. The task force has given St. Kitts and Nevis the enviable record of 0 fatalities, nobody dead, from this devastating global pandemic that has ravaged the populations of the developed world. To achieve this highly commendable statistic, they have had to withstand the pressures of various stakeholders, various shareholders, who should know better, who have insisted on opening our borders prematurely to an influx of persons from coronavirus hotspots. Open the borders. Open the borders, we closing them for. Let the planes come. If it were left to the members opposite, our borders would have been flung wide open long ago. Mr. Speaker, it gives me goosebumps to say it, even now. The members opposite have waged a totally irresponsible campaign to open our borders. If they had their way, perhaps our tiny population would have imploded under the weight of their sheer stupidity and crass self-interest. Imagine, the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party objected to the state of emergency and went as far as to file legal proceedings to have the emergency measures declared unconstitutional. They never want no protocols. They don't want the state of emergency, no control. All them who sick come. All of us get sick. And let it get away in our country. I couldn't believe this. So that they could open our borders to an influx of persons from coronavirus hotspots. It is mind-boggling, Mr. Speaker. And thank God for the leadership of Prime Minister Harris and Team Unity's vision and commitment to our country. This business is not just a matter about being in power to bring lunatic billionaires to go help here. It's not just to get your hands on the country's resources and squander them on your cronies and yourselves. We have a responsibility to a high level of commitment and competence in our country. One shudders to think what might have been if the people of this country did not see the danger of the members opposite and gave Team Unity a resounding victory on the 5th of June. And let me remind you what it was. They kept meeting time and time. We want to bring planes from New York, from Brooklyn, where people in body bags on hospital floor. People sick. Oh, we want people come to vote. No quarantine. Let them fly in. Stand up in the line with all those who here, who protected. Imagine how many of us would have gotten sick if that had happened. And you know what the word is? Somehow it is unity bring COVID here to make Labour lose. In 2015, Timothy Harris talked to the President of the United States to hold back a plane. The plane come 9 o'clock at night, too late. Some was to go all road, some was to go number 1, and so they lose. Unity good. In 2020, Timothy Harris must be talked to the president of China to bring COVID here. And so we locked down, so no plane could come. In 2025, it might well be Russia who Team Unity get up with to do something like that. Huh? What's going on? They so want to be in power that they don't want to protect our people. Don't want to protect our people. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party went to court and they filed a case to say that the state of emergency and emergency powers, what they said? That they were discriminatory to the St. Nevis Labour Party. They actually said that, Mr. Speaker. And all I could say is that those people don't believe in country above self. They were prepared to have the virus flood us so that people come in and flames to vote, coming from hotspots. And because that didn't happen, somehow Unity do something wrong to make them lose the election. I don't understand it. And we should never forget that. Never forget that. Mr. Speaker, I should add to that in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, our country was faced with the constitutional mandate to hold general elections with a very clear mandate. Couldn't get away from it. Once the election is held, 2015, and the first sitting of the parliament, you have 5 years to the day to dissolve the next parliament, or it automatically dissolves. So by the 14th, 15th of May, 2020, the parliament would automatically dissolve. The Constitution goes on to say that once it dissolves, you have 90 days within which to call that election. So by August the 10th, we have to have elections. And you're hearing all sort of confusion. Oh, Unity here won the election, Harris don't want the election. He won't put it after 2021. We're using COVID. Nobody got COVID here. Elections ain't going until next year. No. We have the state of emergency resolution in Parliament. We said 12 months. So, see there. The one is state of emergency next year. So no elections this year again. No elections this year again. So okay, that's what you said. Let's say 6 months then. They get quiet. They didn't say nothing. But they still go on court about the state of emergency. If it's 9 August, so election in August. So when elections in the 5th of June, say, oh, Lord, we ain't ready yet. No, we ain't ready now. August. But we had this constitutional mandate. And within the law, elections were held very clearly. Parliament will dissolve on the 14th of May automatically. Elections must be held by the 10th of August, 90 days after dissolution. But there's COVID and the state of emergency. Parliament had already extended the state of emergency for 6 months. And we call the elections. Nomination day is the 27th of May. And then you hear all sorts of things. All sorts of things. Every day we go in New York, briefings. But people suddenly understand what virtual means. Can you have a public meeting? Can you have a public meeting with mass people getting up and mixing up with each other, shouting in each other's face, potential to spread COVID? And so the regulations were that you can't have mass gatherings, public gatherings. Straightforward. The Labour Party start to have virtual meetings properly from your basement. You could do so. We see Joe Biden doing the same thing in the States. Having election meetings from your basement and putting it out on the internet, spreading it. And you need to do the same thing too. Only that we are more clever, are more innovative. Huh? We have young people in the creative and cultural industry who come up and they put on shows at the Marriott. And that is the basis by which we have this wonderful new ministry of entertainment and entrepreneurship. The creativity, the adaptation to the situation. And Labour couldn't keep up with it. They cry foul. They cry foul. And so, Mr. Speaker, 3 times they got to court within that week before the election day. 3 times on nomination day. They filed up with 400 pages of a case. The state of emergency is unconstitutional and the thing. And they give you 24 hours to go to court to handle it. 24 hours. Next week, another file, 2 more cases filed. In country number 4, they want to put on 184 people on the list. We got them. Put on 184 people on the list. Huh? You know what I mean? Trying things. Then the guy in Nevis, constitution number 9. What's his name? Daly. He gets somebody else to come on the file. They want to join the boundaries case. They want to change the boundaries. They want Douglas boundaries the day before the election. Imagine that. So the Thursday before the Friday of election day, the one got a case and said the boundaries should go. Desperation. And Mr. Speaker, it's a matter of historical record that Labour lost badly. And NRP lose was. They're over there, we're over here. And Mr. Speaker, they can't take it, they couldn't take it. They went to court, filed some 6, 7 election petitions. And they messed them up all badly and had to withdraw all of them. Did not know what they were doing and messed them up big time. And my friend, colleague from number 8, Gene Hamilton, they withdraw from that. And 6 months later, Mr. Speaker, the guy who he beat badly twice, not once but twice, can't take it. He has filed 2 summonses against Gene Hamilton, you know. 2 summonses in the magistrate's court. Not election petition. 2 summonses. And you know what they do that for, Mr. Speaker? Because Gene Hamilton is busy out there giving out care packages for COVID. He going to give out COVID packages. And they said Gene bribing people to vote for him. So all them thousands that they both are giving out at SK and Gen, they're in bribery. All them pictures you see with the right honorable member opposite going visiting people with bag, they're in bribery. But Gene Hamilton giving out care packages, he bribing people to vote for him. You didn't have any care packages in 2015 and you beat him. Yes. You give lots of other people care packages in 2020 and you beat him again. And what you say, you're going to come again and beat him again the next time? Yes. I hear talk something about you I tell you. I don't know. I don't know. You know? But the whole thing is a joke. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I can't let this one slide. The lead counsel who has been leading them for all these years, the esteemed senior counsel from Dominica, Tony Asafan, is currently representing the Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerritt, before the CCJ. Because somebody in Dominica decided, having laws like them here, that they're going to summon say for the same thing in magistrate's court. And Asafan is arguing that he can't understand how you could file a summons outside of an election petition. That is unconstitutional. Their lead counsel, has been for a number of years. Anyway, it's before the court, Mr. Speaker, and it might be inappropriate for me to say more than I have said. Okay? But just to say that we have had those 3 cases hanging over our heads. Any one of them could have seen Unity lose. Any one of them. But Unity persevered, prevailed, and beat them worse than before. Give them a whipping. A whooping. How do you say whooping? Whipping? They lose bad. Covet and the elections went down and they lost. Terribly. Can I imagine that? I want to say, Mr. Speaker, and I say to my colleagues and all of those who support Unity, that the Team Unity administration, the movement, owes a debt of gratitude to our legal team of Douglas Mendez, Senior Counsel, and Christopher Hamill-Smith, SC, and their chambers in Trinidad and Barbados. These 2 gentlemen, first in 2015, I know I said 2015, I gotta remind everybody, they were the ones who put a hole in Douglas and the nonsense to try to sneak to boundary changes. January the 16th, 2015, 4:30 in the afternoon. And they blocked them. Went all the way to the Privy Council. They come back again in 2020. And when they thought they tried the smartness, a quick under the table.
Can you make a proclamation and put it in your
Labordog.com, You understand? But Douglas Mendez and Chris Hamill-Smith have been with us since 2013, Mr. Speaker. Gene Hamilton, member for number 8, Gene Hamilton, will remember speaking to Douglas Mendez. It was on March 2013. 23rd of March 2013. When we filed a case in the motion of no confidence. 26 months. Douglas and his team would not table a motion of no confidence in this parliament. Coming talking about deception. Talking about deception and corruption and all them type of stuff. Those days done with. In this parliament. Done with. Unity has brought a new day. The promise of unity, Mr. Speaker. We campaigned on a platform to build an economic platform which will give all our citizens a higher standard of living, a better quality of life, whether it be low prices for food and basic elements of life. We do that, removal of that from food, medical expenses, funeral expenses, we did all of that. We lower food and basic elements of life. We also complained against the total disregard for our Constitution and the refusal to uphold and be guided by the tenets of good governance that the previous Denzel Douglas-led administration had been bent on following. And the people, and the people of our country have been resounding support for Team Unity, voting for us and return us back here. I remember before 2015, 5 of us over there. After 2015, we over here. How much? 9? You get trout. And now we have gone even further. It was just the other day, 2 weeks ago, the chairman of Labour at the conference at Frigate Bay was talking what? Labour may be dead, but they are buried. Oh, you didn't know that? That's what they were saying? That was said, is what is published. It's published. Labour may be dead, but not yet buried. Well, that's a matter of opinion. Mr. Speaker, I could go on and on and on, but it's important. The year of COVID, serious matter. Mr. Speaker, our government has prevailed. We have been laser focused on protecting the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have been very careful. When other people were opening up, we are very cautious. Our restrictions, people understood. And we are all happy because we put a ring fence around St. Kitts and gradually opened up and opened internally so we could have economic activity within St. Kitts. But we knew at some point we'd have to start opening up gradually to the outside world. But it brought a risk. It brought a risk with it. And we have been saying that. And because we have had this wonderful team of medical experts, have been managing, screening, and when they come, we catch them and we isolate them. We continue to mitigate, to restrain the spread, and we can only give them support. And all of us must do our part. All of those of us who want to go jam in, Juve, take it easy. Take it easy. It's only for a time. We can get there. We need to follow Lala's advice. Have carnival at home. Put a speaker in the corner and a cooler in another one. That's what we do. Take your time. Small acts release 1, 2, you know. Stay where you be. All those who think they could come here to jam and so on, stay where you be. If you're coming from hotspot, stay where you be. Our people here need to be protected, and we'll do what we have to do to protect them. Mr. Speaker, I want to very quickly move on to speak to my ministry, because I spent quite a bit of time laying out the environment in which this government has had to deal with for this year. And Mr. Speaker, I think that we need to get the highest commendation. The Honorable Timothy Harris has led us with distinction, with the enormous support from his team in protecting the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And we are now here in this budgetary cycle to talk about budget as we're going forward. Our budget, Jane, for next year ain't step back, you know. It gone up, albeit a small amount, 2%. We're spending more in our economy. $192 million for capital projects to give people work, construction work, other type of work, so that the economy could keep moving, that people could have economic activity and find work and can live. The government will help when it has to help, but we must look for work. Work can be there. Work can be there for us to look after ourselves and our families and our children. Mr. Speaker, I want to start on my ministries, the ministries for which I superintend, by talking about a couple of capital projects. And I want to announce to this honorable House, this honorable Parliament, and the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, the completion of the annex at the Sir Lee Llewellyn Moore Judicial Complex, Judicial Legal Service Complex. And I encourage each of you to drive across East Independence Square by the courthouse, and you will be pleasantly surprised. You'll be more than pleasantly surprised. You'll be excited to see a new edifice, like a phoenix coming out of the ground, that looked like the courthouse building. Over this year, COVID year, contractor Bertil O'Dane, BC O'Dane and Associates, have constructed a state-of-the-art building to complement the courthouse that has been there for over the last 25 years. And this building, where the old electoral building was, that was flattened, it has gone up in the air and has gone back over the parking lot, the garage. And the building houses 3 key functions for the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs. It has, on the ground floor, as you enter, with security, well-positioned using all the means of technology, a third magistrate court chamber for District A. A third magistrate court chamber for District A. So in addition to the two in the main building, here becomes a third one. It's a smaller chamber, but it's ideal for in-camera hearings. And by saying in-camera, no gallery. So when you have to have juveniles on trial, they go there, you can't have the public come in and look in. And so therefore in-camera hearings. They will look for maintenance court. And it will also be able to be a traffic court. It is going to enhance the work of the magistracy, the summary court, and will continue to have better scheduling to allow us, as we have this COVID period, to put on more cases. What it also does, Mr. Speaker, it allows the magistrates to better schedule matters so that for the first time in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have the situation where we will now have a night court. We will have 3 days a week coming early next year, matters scheduled in the evenings, a night court that allows people who normally have to get off from work and stand in the square half the day, who can't turn up to court, sometimes, witnesses, that certain types of matters will be scheduled in the evening. We're not clear on the hours yet. One recommendation between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. But 3 nights a week, we will be introducing a night court into St. Kitts and Nevis, well, into St. Kitts in the first instance, at District A Magistrates Court. It is something exciting for us in the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, and would help us to continue to reduce the backlogs of cases, the time you have to wait to get before the court. It helps us with access to justice. Access to justice. You want your day in court, you get it quicker. And there are other reasons why that is happening. Because we are doing a number of things in the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs. Also in that building, Mr. Speaker, we will establish or have established a mediation center. And what's a mediation center? For the last few years, the High Court in civil matters from time to time would assign parties to go to mediation. Court-connected mediation. No judge, no legal bearing, no thing, but you could sit down and talk to settle the matter without having the court getting involved. And of course, if you can do that, you could save money. Matters that could take a year, 2 years, could be settled in half an hour. Matters that allow, you might not get everything you want, but it's a means of an alternative dispute resolution. So the time is shortened, the costs are done, and it allows you to maintain good community relations. Mediation Center. We have been training people over the last year, and we have in excess of 25 trained mediators right now by the court. Over the next few weeks, we'll be training even more. And so, if you have a construction dispute, you could find somebody with that type of qualification who could sit down and meet with you. He ain't a judge, but could help you all to facilitate parties to come to an agreement to settle their dispute. So that mediation center is one that is of excitement, because just on November the 6th, Her Excellency, the Chief Justice, Dame Janice Pereira, has issued new practice directions to help to streamline the way in which court-connected mediation can assist the civil matters of our court to help the whole process of resolving it. The third function that building would have is the establishment of a brand new law library. A law library. right in the heart of Bastia. Those of us who are old enough to remember when the public library used to be above the courthouse, the old wooden building, had been there for decades and decades until that building was burned down. We wouldn't say who burned it down, but it was burned down. We lost the library, we lost a lot of court records, but we now build a new law library in this new edifice. A wonderful edifice, beautiful edifice. And I invite the public to go there. The library would be open to practitioners, lawyers, they're using it. It'd be open to litigants in person. So if you're one lawyer and you want to carry your own case court, you could go and pat around and look up for the books that help you, if you know how to read them and get assistance. Students at the CFBC, or if you're doing overseas subjects in law, you can also go there. And the general public can also go there too. We have gotten some over 364 books from Impact Justice, from the assistance of Professor Velma Newton at Covet, who has been able to source his books and have been paid for 64,000 Canadian dollars. Specialist law books and a wide range of matters have been selected. And it now gives us the basis for solid support to our legal fraternity. It is a major project, it's an exciting one. And all of this in the middle of COVID. With COVID going on, we have still been able to deliver this law library right here in Bastia, down Street Bastia. Quickly, Mr. Speaker, I want to mention another capital project that is ongoing. And that is, last December, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis would have purchased the old CNC building, or Back and Kelly building on George Street. That property that goes from George Street to the Bay Road was purchased, Mr. Speaker. And in that building, you'll find that there is going to be a major renovations going on. It will house ultimately five departments under our ministry. It will have the law commission that will be on the top floor of that building in an attic. We didn't know 3 floors, but an extensive attic. On the second floor will be the Registry of Lands. And also, it will also house the Intellectual Property Office. And we expect that early in January of next year, that will be handed over to us, completed. We are very much behind on that, but COVID, although we had been promising 70 days, we expect that it should be completed shortly. That's the second floor and the upper floor. And sometime during the course of next year, Mr. Speaker, we'll also finish the ground floor. And there we will have the Legal Aid and Advice Center will move to that building, as well as we expect that the Electoral Office will find its new home there at the corner of George Street and the Sands, opposite the courthouse. So this building is another exciting project for the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs. And we expect that these will be provided. You would note, Mr. Speaker, in volume 2 of the budget estimates that these 2 projects are clearly set out there. The CNC building, legal services complex, has a price of $1.4+ million, while the extension of this new building, the expansion of the judicial legal services building, in the range of $2.5 million. But they are exciting capital projects that are coming on stream in this very tight COVID world in which we live in. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, I have to say that we have a very troubling situation at the courthouse building. The High Court building was constructed some 20+ years ago. it was brought on stream just after 1995, had some problems in construction for many years. But it's been a long time, and it has not had a major uplift since then. And what we have found, Mr. Speaker, during the course of this year, that there are a number of troubling issues with that building. There are issues that speak of mold, issues that speak about leakage. When it rains, the upper floor gets flooded, and there's serious leakage, as well as the AC, the air conditioning systems have all gone bad. The ducts are infested by bats and rats, making it potential for sick building and need to be replaced. There are other things that are wrong with that building. And we have been negotiating with the Ministry of Finance to be able to give us a major capital project to lift that building back to its former state. It is critical that those who work, who live there, who work there, work in a proper environment, a healthy environment. Whether it's going to be our judicial officers, the judges that operate there, the staff, and just as importantly, the public that has to visit those buildings, we expect that that will be done expeditiously. Mr. Speaker, those capital projects are things that are being moving. We want them done, and they are for the benefit of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. I want, Mr. Speaker, let's continue our capital projects, because you notice, if you were to go to number 4 in the volume 2 of the estimates, the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, you'll see a project in relation to the land registry. You recall, Mr. Speaker, some 2 to 3 years ago, that we came to this Parliament to pass the land registry bill, in which we separated the land registry from the High Court registry. It was deemed critical because we had been sinking in terms of the international index for the ease of doing business. It took people months, and I say in some cases years, to get their documents processed. They were building up. The courts had expanded. We now had a second judge. We now have masters coming in. The duties of the registrar and the staff had expanded, and it was necessary for us to redefine what has happened. And so we separated the land registry from the High Court registry, Mr. Speaker. And it has paid dividends. We searched for and found an experienced registrar in the national, Mrs. Dawn Myers Chambers Myers, who worked as registrar of lands in Barbados, and who has been with us the last year and a half, 2 years. And I'm happy to say to this honorable House, Mr. Speaker, that today we can say that you can get your titles back in an average of less than 30 days. In some days you can get in a week. That is a major, major advance. The backlog has disappeared, Mr. Speaker. It has been a major advance in the way in which we do business, the ease of doing business. Since Ms. Myers has been here, she has done more than 6,000 titles in Bastia and over 2,000 to 3,000 in Nevis. We continue to work to improve this. And we do it this way, Mr. Speaker, because we remember that just last year, the Honorable Prime Minister made the announcement to this Parliament that we were going to be embarking, or had embarked, on a strategy of digital transformation. That our country would digitally be transformed. And we in the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs and the Attorney General's Chambers have taken up that mantle. And one of the ways in which we are doing it is in terms of digitally using the Registry of Lands. We have been working with the government of China and Taiwan and have employed a company called HiWeb, who have done quite a significant work in terms of digitalizing the work. To date, we have scanned more than 12,500 titles into a database. We have turned them into electronic forms. And early next year, we expect that practitioners could stay in the comfort of their offices and would be able to search online in terms of the registry, the title registry in the lands registry. It is a remarkable achievement that we have done in under 12 months. We have employed some 4 young ladies with the support of the Republic of China and Taiwan, and we will continue to ensure that the whole registry is digitized, that we now can. We'll also be able to file applications online. And so this process has been gone through. We have finished phase 1. We are moving into phase 2. But that's not all, Mr. Speaker, because we have entered into a further agreement with the American company of Mediation, Land Governance, an American company that many of us would be aware visited St. Kitts over the last Christmas and into the early parts of this year, and before COVID struck, we were able to map every lot of land on St. Kitts below a certain level of the mountain code. Our lands have been digitized, have been captured on a map, because this is the basis on which we have done a cadastral survey. Many of us will go to a village or we go to McKnight, we see an empty lot of land. Who land that is? Nobody knows. Who land that is? Don't know. How do we get to find it? You do a search in the court. It's hard to find it. The process that we are embarking on is that every lot of land in St. Kitts and Nevis, well, in St. Kitts first, and then we move to Nevis, will have a parcel ID. We are going to build a cadastre, a register, in which every lot of land is given a unique parcel ID. And that process is then on the way as we speak. We had the services of 3 drones came here and they went around the island, flying at a certain level, and they took pictures of all the land. That map has now been put together, and we are in discussion with the company to move that process forward. This is being managed by a core team of interdepartments with lands and surveys, the director of lands and surveys, integral part of that thing. Of course, the Registry of Lands. We have had the e-government coordinator from ICTs have been there. Senior Counsel Tashna Powell is a part of it. We have from Inland Revenue, we have people from planning. So there is this core team that has worked to ensure that we are able to produce this cadastre. It means that land management in St. Kitts and Nevis has turned the corner. As we move forward, Mr. Speaker, we'll be able to manage our lands in terms of being able to speed up the process of doing business, for us to look in tax revenue, inland revenue, we'll be able to map every lot of land, in terms of the banks being able to look at mortgages and so forth. All of this is happening as we work to develop this land management system that centers around the land registry and lands and surveys. It's very exciting, Mr. Speaker. It's very exciting.
Honourable Member, your initial 90-minute time period has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I crave your indulgence to ask the Honourable Parliament if we could have an additional 3 hours. I mean, half an hour. I'm trying to think.
What's the final request?
If I could have half an hour more, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, the question is that the honourable member has requested an additional 30 minutes. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleagues for having trusted me that I don't speak too long. Over the 30 minutes. You'll let me know. Mr. Speaker, these are some critical areas within the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs. And I think I should just quickly go over them, because we are talking about the High Court, where the mediation process that we have embarked on is going to make a sea change, we believe, in how we have access to justice and how people can resolve their disputes in a much more efficient manner. The administration of justice in St. Kitts and Nevis is alive and well, and we will continue to ensure that all citizens are given the opportunity to access it, to have a fair and equitable resolution of their matters before that. The High Court also, Mr. Speaker, I should point out, is one where we look at criminal matters. And at this point in time, we have been working with a committee in which has the Honorable Justice Ward QC, who oversees matters, criminal matters, working with the DPP, with the Solicitor General and others, to ensure that their regulations are developed for us to establish a proper criminal division within the High Court system, to further the criminal justice system, to further the administration of justice in our country. Mr. Speaker, some years ago, I think 2 years ago, we would have come to Parliament and we would have amended the Magistrates' Codes of Procedure to be able to abolish the preliminary inquiry, PIs. When somebody committed an offense at the Magistrates' Court, committed offense, that's a criminal, the magistrate would meet and hear the matter, take detailed evidence notes, and prepare depositions that will go up to the High Court, where that would all have to be done over again. Very tedious, very long, and in many cases, criminal matters could take years before they get a resolution. The concept of developing a criminal division in the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court is not new. It has been tried in other jurisdictions, and we here in St. Kitts and Nevis are now importing that here. And so, as I said, His Lordship, along with senior members of the public bar, are working to refine the regulations to make this a reality, where paper committals will be used to advance the process of criminal justice. What does it mean? It means that the DPP's office will prepare depositions, all the paperwork, and present them to a magistrate, who now, instead of having a whole hearing, will see if the paper's in order before acceding to send them up to the High Court for trials. And, Mr. Speaker, what this does, it now requires us to strengthen the DPP's office. You note that in our estimates that we have asked for a legal researcher to be attached to the DPP's office to assist in processing these documents, to speed up that process, because you don't want to remove one bottleneck and put it somewhere else. You'd also note, Mr. Speaker, that in our estimates for this year, the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs are asking for 2 new senior Crown Counsels, one of which will go to the DPP's office and one of which will join the Attorney General's chambers. Again, the new senior Crown at the DPP's office will assist greatly in advancing the criminal justice system as we see it. Because Without assizes, without the PIs, we no longer have assizes in St. Kitts. We have continuous trials in St. Kitts and Nevis all year round. And sometimes these coincide with trials in Nevis. The DPP's office needs strengthening so that matters are tried in St. Kitts and are tried in Nevis simultaneously without there being any hindrance to advancing the administration of justice in our country. And we are happy to thank the Ministry of Finance and the Minister of Finance for granting that allocation in our COVID walk-up time, that we are able to help to build, as it was, the staff to advance the administration of justice there. My time is getting tight, Mr. Chair, because I would have liked to have gone in to explain the nature of the matters that have been done in St. Kitts and Nevis at the criminal court. Just to say that we are very pleased with the way in which the DPP's office has functioned this year. In Nevis over the last couple of months, we have had some 5 or so convictions, and we continue to see our staff there excel and work very hard. They have been doing the yeoman's job recently, and we hope that that will continue going forward. Mr. Speaker, at the DPP's office when the year began, there were some 22 matters that were listed for trial in St. Kitts and 9 listed in Nevis. 2 matters were heard in St. Kitts before the court was suspended indefinitely in March 2020 over the growing concerns for safety and the need for social distancing. The criminal assize for April 2010 in Nevis was cancelled as a result. So that because of COVID, we have had, as it was, a truncated year. Trial resumed on the 12th of October 2020 in Nevis and the 9th November in St. Kitts, after modifications were made to the courtrooms in compliance with the COVID-19 protocols. The impact of COVID-19 could be seen at the end of the court sessions when the statistics were tallied. The office was able to dispose of a total of 19 cases, 14 in St. Kitts and 5 in Nevis, in comparison to 25 matters disposed of in 2019. Mr. Speaker, this year we also began to operationalize paperless committals for criminal matters. This has revolutionized the preparation process for the office of the DPP. This process is relatively more truncated and it may significantly reduce the time and may result in greater levels of efficiency in 2021. I would want to say, Mr. Speaker, that when COVID began back in March, the court took a very interesting position towards it. And we found that the Chief Justice issued directions. Civil matters were suspended, and in-person civil matters, I should say, so that the second courthouse was not used, Mr. Speaker. And it did not stop civil trials from happening, though. And what we have seen, Mr. Speaker, is the widespread use of technology in the court system. Very interesting, because there has been a level of efficiency that has emerged as a result of that. The courts have met regularly from their chambers, from people's front rooms. I would not go as far as to say their bedrooms, but lawyers, litigants can participate in trials in various parts of the world here in St. Kitts and Nevis by Zoom, by using, as it was, the internet to speak to each other. And what has happened is that we have had, as it was, a very active calendar year in terms of civil matters. The court master has been meeting, sitting in Grenada and hearing matters here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So that the court system continues to function. The magistrates' court, surprisingly enough, we have not yet been able to devise how to have that done in person, virtually. And Magistrates Court have continued to meet in person with fewer matters so as to establish the type of physical and social distancing that has become so important. And so there has been a slowing down of the amount of cases that have been heard in the Magistrates Court, Mr. Speaker. I want to touch very quickly, Mr. Speaker, on the work of the Law Commission. The Law Commission is headed by Law Commissioner Mrs. Josephine Malalu, from the Web, former senior magistrate. And she has been appointed to that post over the last 2 or so years. And we have seen some significant work being done by the Law Commission. What we have had is that the work that had begun with Mr. Mukasa some years ago, since 2000, to have the revision of laws done, has continued with Mrs. Josephine Malalu. And so we have just this month paid money to the Law Revision Center based in Anguilla for Senkis and Nevis to do a further revision of laws that would be for the year 2020. The last revision was up to 2017, and so we are now going to do 2018, 2019, 2020. That has been, we have entered into agreement with the Law Revision Center in Anguilla, and this is being marshaled by Ms. Josephine Malalu. You recall that early this year at Government House, we would have had the launching of the 2017 edition of the revised laws. And just to back up, I think it's important maybe to say 2 words quickly on this. Laws are made by this Parliament on a regular basis. The laws are sometimes amendments to laws that have already been there. So a particular law could have had a number of amendments, maybe in 1 year or over a case of 5 years. And so the laws are all over the place. To put it in perspective, there was a law revision back in 1921. The next law revision would have been done in 1961. It took 40 years to consolidate all those laws. And the 1961 laws, the old books, served us well. There was not another revision again, Mr. Speaker, until the year 2000. So some 50 years later, or that's 40 years later, 39 years, you have this revision that is being done. Okay? And so it is incumbent on us, for the good of our country, whether it is in terms of economics, social issues, that we constantly update our laws. And the laws then were updated again in 2009, and then in 2017. But we have now taken the decision, Mr. Speaker, that we will now be updating our laws every 2 years. And so we have entered into that agreement. And so over the next year and a half, we expect that we would have year 2020 coming on stream. But here's the good news, Mr. Speaker. When we met at Government House early this year to launch the 2017 edition, hard copy, hard volume, 8 volumes that covered all the laws. We also launched a website for the Law Commission. All the laws of Senkis and Nevis, all the ordinances for Nevis are online. Now, anybody, any citizen of Senkis and Nevis Anybody anywhere in the world can access our laws. They're online, Mr. Speaker, and they are updated online. It is part of our drive for digital transformation. Prime Minister Harris has set us a goal to give us a digital society. Our laws are there ready to support such a digital society. And so it's important to understand that you go to the Law Commission and you can get access to the laws of St. Kitts and Nevis. I want, Mr. Speaker, my time is winding down, to talk a little bit about this technology I mentioned. Because we in the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, we in the Office of the Attorney General have taken on board very seriously this means of making us digitally competent. We are cognizant of the fact that just a few years ago, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis would have established an e-government portal that if you go to your smartphone, you go to any device, and you were to type into it www.gov.kn, you get a portal for St. Kitts and Nevis. You could be anywhere in the world, and you get to see what St. Kitts and Nevis is like. The whole set of pictures, whether it's Charleston Harbor, St. John's Church, Port Zante, Vincent Hill, school children playing. And it's lets you see what SKNS has. It shows you Parliament. It explains ministries to you. This portal is a foundation for our country. But that's not all. It's attached to a number of ministries that have their own websites. The Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs and the Attorney General's Chambers has launched its own website. And we urge our citizens to visit this website. It's legal.gov.kn. legal.gov.kn. You can get it on your smartphone. You can get it on any device. It has speeches. It has articles. On it, for instance, we publish court calendars, traffic court, maintenance court. Things that happen in the court systems are published there. On this website, we publish electoral lists. So the lists that are published every month of anybody registering in St. Kitts and Nevis are published on this portal, on this webpage. It is an innovative, very attractive webpage. And we invite all our citizens to visit it. It talks to the Law Commission webpage, and the Law Commission webpage talks to it. They all talk to the portal. So you can find various ways to get to know what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis. In addition to that, within the Attorney General's Chambers, we have established the AG's MIS, the Management Information System, where all our lawyers have access to their matters online. This is hosted in the cloud, so at home, at court, you can access the portal to get the matters that are available to you. Of course, that is restricted to staff of the Attorney General's Chambers. Of course, Mr. Speaker, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court has revolutionized the way in which we bring claims to the court. Before, you had to go to the registry and fill out a claim form and pay $22.50 to start a matter against somebody else. Today, practitioners file claims from the comfort of their offices. They do so online. You cannot start a matter, a civil matter at the court, without filing it online. A digital society is coming. And I just want to end by mentioning the fact, I mentioned earlier, of the Land Administration Information System that's under development by HiWeb and the Department of Technology here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to mention a number of other things. The intellectual, I have to be careful. 10 more? Okay. Legal aid. The Legal Aid and Advice Office is one in which we now have the benefit of a second lawyer who serve people of lesser means. There are some of us who can't afford to engage an attorney. But on East Independence Square, there is a legal aid office that is provided for by the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, where a wide range of matters can be had. Juveniles can be represented, estate planning, divorces, maintenance, a whole range of matters can be had. There are two lawyers, a director, a senior lawyer is there who has been joined by another counsel who can provide support for our people who need assistance in civil matters and other matters before the court. To help you develop paperwork that you may not know, to fill them out. And we urge you to work with them. One of the mandates of the legal aid has been to take their work to the rural areas. And over the last couple of years, they've gone to all the villages, community centers, where they will have meetings and invite people from the rural communities to come and meet with them. This year has been more difficult in the COVID environment, but they're still available to a number of people to do so. This year they focus a lot on estate planning. And what do they mean by estate planning? Very often people die. They don't make a will. They don't make any instructions what to do with the property. And you drive over here, you see a dilapidated building rotten, a piece of land overgrown. Your mother passed away, she got 10 children. Who must get the land? How do you handle it? It's a problem. And so, planning for when you are no longer here and you don't want any fight among your children. Planning in a way to be able to disperse, distribute what you have after you're dead is what we call estate planning. And the Legal Aid and Advice Center has embarked on a process to assist all of us. It's not just for people who got money and wealthy people. You could be of limited means, and even more reason why you need to plan for when you're no longer here. You might got a small piece of land, you might got a car, you might got something. You should say what you want to happen with it beforehand. And I just encourage many of our citizens to take advantage of this service that is with us. I want to mention, Mr. Speaker, a committee of which I head, and that is the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee, NAMLAC Committee. This NAMLAC Committee, Mr. Speaker, emerged out of a national risk assessment process as part of the serious preparations for the mutual evaluation process, which was originally slated to be held in March of this year. I call it NAMLAC, National Anti-Money Laundering Committee, is a multi-sectoral working group that draws upon expertise residing in several ministries and departments. The first meeting had been held in July 2019, but there have been various committees that operate under the umbrella of this group. The main objectives of the group have been to issue operational and informative guidelines on the mutual evaluation to all relevant agencies as necessary, to engage public and private stakeholders and conduct focus group discussions, meetings and workshops in preparation for the mutual evaluation of St. Kitts and Nevis, conduct risk-based outreach for sectors and so forth, set timelines for deliverables, submit or approve the submission of documents, and so forth. I just want to say what this is about a little bit more. St. Kitts and Nevis is part of the international community, and we have entered into treaty obligations with a wide range of countries. The European Union and organizations where many of the first world developed countries operate. The OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where you have these big power countries. Watch to see how countries around the world behave and operate. And they are very stringent on how we conduct our affairs. One of the things that they did was to develop an organization called FATF, a Financial Action Task Force, back in 1989. What FATF does is to monitor how people pass money from one country to another. The money launder money. 10 years later, they added to that the issue about counter-terrorism, how people in certain parts of the world used the financial systems to spread money, to finance terrorism, to blow up a plane, blow up a building. And more recently, they've added a third leg. How some people would use money that is used in the financial system for the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, bombs, dirty bombs that could do us damage. And so they monitor our systems, our technology, our laws. They monitor how we send money overseas. Many of us would be frustrated how it takes sometimes a week, 2 weeks to clear money coming from the United States and other countries. Because they watch what the banks do and they process it. And so this committee that we have is to ensure that our country, small country, is doing what is right in the eyes of these people. Because what they will do is that will put us on a blacklist. And a blacklist means that we would have difficulty in exchanging monies, in functioning in this world that we have in. Now they're coming here next year. They're coming in March this year to review our systems. They couldn't come because of COVID, but they will come in March of next year. And this is one of the companies and one of the committees that the composition has the Attorney General, the Chairperson, the Financial Secretary, they have the Controller of Customs, Director of Public Prosecutions, there's a senior representative from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Controller of Inland Revenue, directors of the branches of the Financial Services Regulatory Commission, both in St. Kitts and Nevis, Chief Immigration Officer, and so forth and so forth. The legal advisor in Nevis and in administration. It's an important function, and we are fortunate that this year we were on a red list for another one of these oversight committees that we have been removed from. But Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, Bahamas have gone on a blacklist. And so we don't want that to happen to us, our small jurisdiction, because we depend tremendously on inflows of foreign monies that come to the banking system. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of other little things I wanted to mention, but I've touched on most of them. I want to end briefly by speaking a little bit about the rule of law. The rule of law, Mr. Speaker, I want to end by mentioning that the conscientious application, or maybe I'll go back a little further, that we in the Ministry of the Attorney General of Justice and Legal Affairs continue to work to preserve our robust legal and policy framework for managing the response to the pandemic. We are also seeking the necessary financial and other support to better enable us to do so. And we have looked at some of the monies that we have been allocated and how we have spent some. Mr. Speaker, I have sought to emphasize the centrality of the rule of law in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The rule of law, Mr. Speaker, has been described as a principle of governance in which all persons, institutions, and entities, public and private, including the state itself, are accountable to laws. These laws, Mr. Speaker, must be publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated. These laws, Mr. Speaker, must also be intra-virus as opposed to ultra-virus, the Constitution, in keeping with the Constitution, and consistent with international norms and standards. Mr. Speaker, the conscientious application of the rule of law enables good governance. In that connection, Mr. Speaker, we will continue in 2021 to advance the good governance agenda. Mr. Speaker, this Team Unity administration understands that poor governance and corruption can be corrosive to economic and social development. Team Unity has therefore endorsed the continuous process of strengthening the good governance national framework. The promotion of the good governance agenda can be seen in the open approach to making economic decisions, as is evidenced by this meeting of the National Assembly, when we as a nation will discuss, or hear your leaders discuss, the annual financial statement and budgetary proposals for the upcoming year. Mr. Speaker, the faithful observation of this tenet of good governance is reflected in the commitment of this government to the principles of transparency and accountability. Mr. Speaker, the government seeks to ensure that the people of this country are well informed, and we do so through ongoing and frequent dissemination of information. These include the government press conferences, New York updates, leadership matters, and others of that nature. Mr. Speaker, we continue to work towards strengthening the legal framework to support and promote the good governance agenda. We have become party to various treaties and undertake international obligations that signal our commitment to ensuring sustainable progress in the fight against corruption. We will continue in order to fully enforce the integrity in public life, the Freedom of Information Act, and the Data Protection. Mr. Speaker, in that regard, I wanted just to mention that the Integrity Public Life Commission has been fully set up. It has been fully manned. There is a commission, is headed by retired Justice Pauletta Lance. She has with her Mr. Freddie Knight and Mrs. Body as well, who are part of that commission. And I have in my hand that we have received from the Office of the Integrity Commission a note from the Chief Executive Officer, who is Mr. Albert Edwards, former Director of Audit, who works in that institution. There is a fully staffed office on Liverpool Road in the Laundering building. And I'll just read this. A note received on November 25th, 2020. The attached correspondence, as captioned, is an initial document to highlight the areas the Integrity Commission considers need supporting regulations, more clarity, or amendments. The document is forwarded as a precursor to further discussions on the regulations. The Commission avails itself to meeting with you and other counsel to determine what are the appropriate regulations. We therefore await your indication of a proposed time, date, and venue for this discussion. This was received on November 25th. And so, on that note, Mr. Speaker, as you write me down, I believe that you would appreciate that the laws are particularly essential, those dealing with good governance, but proper administration and implementation is a complex and expensive endeavor. It would demand a high level of expertise and preparedness in order to successfully transition from our current regime. In other words, it has been 40 years since we in the Federation would have had to submit a declaration of assets and liabilities that is similar to statements submitted for income tax purposes. We're not paying any income tax. But that is what happens in other jurisdictions. Every year people have to give income tax returns. We in St. Davis have not done so for 40 years. And when we now bring on this complex cities of integrity in public life, we expect our public servants, our leaders, to be able to produce these, and we will be doing so, but in a proper manner and in a short order. And Mr. Speaker, my ministry is charged primarily with responsibility for the oversight of the system of justice in our country, and we have therefore requested a reasonable investment to undertake a myriad of fundamentally important responsibilities. The funds allocated to the ministry will form the basis upon which it can continue to function and continue to seek to ensure that the rights enshrined on the Supreme Constitution are protected. Mr. Speaker, I've said before, and I'll say it again, the preservation of democracy must embrace an ethos of constant development and the consistent promotion of the rule of law. I believe that to efficaciously preserve such ideals, it is imperative that adequate resources must be allocated to achieve these worthy ends. I'm confident that through a conservative policy of appropriation and intelligent control of our expenditures, the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs and the Office of the Attorney General will seek to maintain a balanced budget and will also seek to obtain the maximum economy consistent with the vision of this ministry. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.